The prolonged airlift occupied the US Air Force in Europe during the decisive phase of the Chinese Revolution. The US-backed nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, were losing the Chinese Civil War.
Hundreds of millions of men and women that were slaves, in effect, that were like pack horses, they weren't even treated like people by imperialism, suddenly erupt on the stage of history in the most dramatic way. Now, Mao Zedong organized a classical revolutionary peasant war.
On August the 29th, 1949, the Soviets successfully tested their own atomic bomb. In March 1953, Stalin died, but the bureaucratic dictatorship he had created continued. In Eastern Germany, the ruling Socialist Unity Party under Walter Ulbricht continued to pressurize the workers to produce at their physical limits in order to develop heavy industry. Nationalization was carried out to plan the economy, but appeared to many to be undertaken to facilitate reparations payments to the Soviets. On Stalinallee, in 1953, on the 16th of June, building workers downed tools, demanding a reduction in work norms. The party conceded, but the movement spread rapidly across the German Democratic Republic. Soviet tanks took to the streets and repressed the uprising with bloodshed and arrests. Concessions were granted, and over 300,000 people left to the West, where living standards were higher. From 1949 to 1961, 2.6 million people left the East. They were celebrated in the West as refugees from communism. In the East, the government pointed to the many Nazis in position of authority in West Germany and argued that the West was a continuation of fascism from the Nazi era. For the faithful, in East Germany, the news that the Soviets had taken the lead in sending Yuri Gagarin to space indicated a future where the Soviet system would conquer the Earth. Within 20 years, it was projected that the Soviets would overtake the United States of America.
They sent the first man to space. And that meant if you can conquer space, perhaps you can conquer Earth. That was the theory. Space technology would enable the Soviet Union to leap forward technologically, apply it to Earth, and develop the economy very rapidly. The Soviet economy was growing 10 to 15% a year. The American economy 3 to 5% a year. The calculation was by 1970, the Soviet Union will catch up with America. By 1980, it will overtake America and be the richest country in the world. That was the theory in the Soviet Union, and many people in the United States took that very, very, very seriously. Alan Shepard went to space in May 1949, then the Soviets sent another man to space. On the 6th of August 1961, German Titov went to space and he circled the Earth 10 times in a spaceship driven by himself. And in the cartoon in East German newspapers it said, from each according to their ability, to each according to their needs, free housing, free healthcare, free education, free transportation, the most steel, the most electricity, the richest culture, the richest living standards. The Soviet Union was going to conquer the world by having the highest culture and living standards in the world within 20 years' time. Now, that was done just 7 days before the building of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was built on the 13th of August, 1961. When they built the wall, again, they knew it would be a bit of a propaganda disaster. So what they did was they invited the cosmonaut who had just come back from space, German Titov, to come to Berlin just after the building of the Berlin Wall. They closed off 68 barriers, and then they invited German Titov to come straight from Moscow, straight from space, to the main square where we were earlier on. German Titov stood on the platform and he made a rousing speech. 200,000 people were there, tears in their eyes, celebrating their belief in the new future. And German Titov turned around in broken German and he said, "Comrades, in 5 years' time, we will send a man to the moon." And everyone was, "Hooray!" He goes, "In 10 years' time, we will send a man to Mars." And everyone was cheering, tears in their eyes. And then he goes, "In 15 years' time, comrades, we will send a man to Venus." And everyone was cheering. And one person put up their hand and goes, "When can we go to West Berlin?" "One thing after another, comrades. Get your priorities right." Someone called on the next door neighbour a couple of days later, knocks on the door. Little kid answers the door, 6 years of age. He turns around and he goes, "Where's your dad?" "Oh, he's gone to the moon. He'll be back in an hour." So, "Where's your older brother?" "He's gone to Mars, back in 2 hours." So, "Where's your mum?" "Oh, she's gone to the shops, get some meat. God knows when she'll be coming back." And that was a contradiction in East German society between the ability to achieve enormous things by allocating the resources, the Soviet Union, East Germany, and the inability to achieve, if you like, meet the everyday needs of the consumer, multi-million needs of the consumer, contradicted by the way the bureaucracy operated.
In 1961, to stop the drain of the workforce, the Berlin Wall was built to close off emigration to the West. The wall was presented as a stopgap measure in advance of the victory of communism and to stop the threat of war.
When they built the Berlin Wall, the man in charge of East Germany was Walter Ulbricht. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, under Ulbricht's regime from 1949 until 1961, loads of people left as refugees from East Germany for political and economic reasons. 2.6 million people left East Germany between 1949 and 1961. A wave of refugees left in 1953. The border was open at that time, so they could leave. And they took advantage of that. And therefore, Erich Honecker here, who was the next guy to take over from Walter Ulbricht, he was organised to build the Berlin Wall. And when they built the Berlin Wall, you could no longer cross. 1971, Erich Honecker replaced Walter Ulbricht, and Walter Ulbricht was shocked by that, and a couple of years later he died. And when he died, where did he go? Huh?
To the west.
To the west. No, he went to heaven. God, I thought in Liverpool you were Catholics. Knocks on the pearly gates. Who answers the door?
God.
St. Peter, that's right, thank you. St. Peter answers the door, and he opens the door and he looks around and he says, "I know you, you're Walter Ulbricht. You drove 2.6 million people out of East Germany. You don't belong in here, you belong in hell." He goes like that, flick, down he goes to hell. They got a little hole there, whoomp. Down he went to hell. 3 weeks later, there's a knock on the door. So Peter opens the door, there's 6 little devils standing there like this. He says, "What in God's name are you creatures doing here?" Because we're the first refugees from hell. And that was the effect Walter Ulbricht had. He tried to drive people away.
The building of the wall did allow East Germany to speed up its economic development and to raise living standards more rapidly, but not as rapidly as living standards rose in the West. The Berlin Wall was the perfect symbol for the anti-communist movement in the West. Shootings and deaths to keep people in the East were used as proof of the superiority of the Western capitalist democratic system.